The call came in at 2:17 inches the afternoon, right as I was pushing the final commit on a security patch we'd been building for 6 weeks. I remember the exact time because I looked at my monitor when her name lit up my phone, and I thought she never calls during the day. Not anymore. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. The kind of cheerful that takes rehearsal. The acquisition went through, she said. 18 million. Wired by end of week. A pause. Then, I need you to move out of the house by Friday. I've already spoken to an attorney. I didn't say anything for a moment. I sat there in my chair, staring at the line of code I'd just written, listening to the hum of the server room 2 floors below me. Marcus, she said. Did you hear me? I heard you, I said. Good. I'll have the papers ready tomorrow morning. This doesn't have to be complicated. She hung up first. She always hung up first. Hi, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm 32 years old, and until about 4 minutes ago, I was the co-founder of a cybersecurity startup called Viridian Systems. My wife was the CEO. I was the one who built it. And somewhere in the middle of watching it grow from a 2-person operation in our spare bedroom into a company worth $18 million, she had decided that I was no longer part of the picture she wanted to live in. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel the full weight of it: the 6 years of marriage, the 3 years of building something from nothing. The mornings I skipped the gym to debug her presentations. The nights I stayed up until 4 because a client's firewall had a gap the size of a highway and she had a board meeting at 9. 5 minutes. Then I opened my laptop again, pulled up a folder I hadn't touched in 8 months, and I made one phone call. The man who answered was my former boss, a patent attorney named Gerald who had taken a chance on me when I was 24 and fresh out of grad school. I had done him a favor 3 years ago. A significant one. He had told me then that he owed me, and that when I needed him, I should not hesitate. Activate the filing, I said. How much time do we have? He asked. 48 hours before the acquisition closes escrow. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, I'll have everything ready by morning, and we ended the call. Now let me tell you what my wife had forgotten. Or maybe she never truly understood it to begin with, because she had always seen the business as hers, her idea, her pitch deck, her investor relationships, her face on the website. What she never paid close attention to was the engine underneath all of it. The algorithm I had written over 14 months in that spare bedroom, on cold cups of coffee, while she went to networking events and shook hands and made promises I then had to figure out how to keep. She signed documents in those early years the way people sign terms of service agreements quickly, without reading, because she trusted that I would handle the details and the details would always work in her favor. She had forgotten about the IP assignment clause. When we incorporated Viridian, Gerald had helped me structure the company so that the core algorithm, the thing that made us worth anything to an acquirer, was held under a separate IP agreement tied to my name specifically. The clause stated that in the event of a dissolution of the founding partnership, defined as either a divorce filing or a forced buyout of either co-founder without mutual consent, the license to use that algorithm would revert to the original developer pending renegotiation. In plain English, without my signature authorizing the transfer of that IP to the acquiring company, the deal could not legally close. She had signed that document 3 years ago at a kitchen table in Denver, during a week when we were both so exhausted and so hopeful that we signed about 40 pages of incorporation documents without breaking for dinner. I remembered the night. She had been wearing a gray sweater and her hair was up. She kissed my cheek after we finished and said, "We're really doing this, aren't we?" We were, just apparently not together. I drove home that evening and let myself in with the spare key I kept in the magnetic box under the wheel well of my truck, a detail so mundane that I had never thought to mention it to her in 6 years of marriage, which meant she had no reason to look for it when she changed the front door lock sometime between her phone call and my arrival. I walked through the back entrance through the garage, which still ran on the code we'd set when we moved in. I collected my personal documents from the fireproof safe in my office, original incorporation papers, Gerald's contact details, 3 hard drives, the framed photo my mother had given me of my grandfather's house in Ohio. I left everything else exactly as it was. On the kitchen island, I placed one thing, a copy of the IP assignment clause, printed clean on white paper, with a yellow sticky note on top. 2 words. My handwriting. Good luck. Then I drove to my college roommate's apartment and slept on his couch for the first time since I was 23. She called at 6 in the morning. I watched the screen light up from the kitchen counter and poured myself a cup of coffee instead. She called 4 more times before 8. By 9, her attorney was calling. I let Gerald handle that. He called me at 9:45. They found the clause, he said. There was the smallest trace of satisfaction in his voice. Her team is spirited. What are they saying? They're claiming you buried it intentionally. That it constitutes bad faith in the original partnership agreement. He paused. They don't have a case. The document is clean, the signatures are authenticated, and the filing I submitted this morning with the county recorder's office is time-stamped and unambiguous. Without your authorization, the acquirer cannot take possession of the core IP. The deal is an illegal hold. $18 million, sitting in escrow, going nowhere. I asked Gerald what our options were. You have 3, he said. You authorize the transfer and take whatever they offer for your equity stake. You negotiate a new terms agreement before the hold expires. Or you let the hold expire in 48 hours and the acquisition falls apart entirely. What happens to her if the deal falls apart? He was quiet for a moment. She's personally guaranteed 2 bridge loans against the acquisition proceeds. If it collapses, those come due immediately. Combined balance is just over $900,000. I stood by my roommate's window and watched a delivery truck park on the street below. A man in a yellow vest climbed out, checked his phone, started unloading boxes. Just a regular Thursday. Somewhere across the city, my wife was sitting in an attorney's office watching her $18 million hold very still. I told Gerald I needed until noon. I spent those 2 hours thinking about what I actually wanted, not what I deserved, not what I could take. What I wanted to build with whatever came next. The truth was, I had never cared about the money the way she did. I cared about the work. I cared about the problem we were trying to solve, keeping small businesses safe from the kind of cyber attacks that could erase years of someone's life in an afternoon. The algorithm existed because I believed in that problem. The company existed because I believed we could scale the solution. And if I'm being honest with myself, I had watched the company drift away from that mission for about a year before the phone call came. More enterprise contracts, more optics, less substance, and some part of me had already been grieving it quietly. By noon I had made 2 decisions. The first, I would authorize the IP transfer. But not for free. Gerald would negotiate my equity buyout at fair market valuation, independently assessed, not offered by her team, plus a licensing fee structure that would tie a percentage of the acquisition proceeds to the charitable foundation I had already decided to build. The second, the foundation would fund coding education for kids in low-income school districts. Specifically, the kind of kids I had been. Kids in towns where the most advanced computer science available was a typing elective in a classroom with machines that still ran Windows 7. Gerald called her attorney at 12:01. The negotiation took 9 hours. Her team pushed back on the independent valuation. Gerald held firm. They tried to argue the licensing fee structure was legally novel and unenforceable. Gerald sent them 3 precedents from the past decade. They went quiet for 2 hours. Then they accepted. My equity buyout came to $4.2 million. The licensing fee attached to the acquisition generated an additional $800,000 to be paid over 3 years into the foundation account. Gerald filed the authorization at 9:47 that evening, 17 minutes before the 48-hour window closed. The acquisition proceeded. The escrow released. I was back on my roommate's couch eating leftover Thai food when the confirmation hit my email. She tried to reach me twice more that week. The first time was a voicemail, her voice compressed and controlled in the way it always got when she was managing herself carefully. She said she wanted to have a conversation. That she thought things had moved too fast. That she wasn't sure she had handled things fairly. I appreciated the honesty. I didn't call back. The second time was a letter, forwarded through Gerald's office since she no longer had my address. It was handwritten, which surprised me. 3 pages. She talked about fear. About what the money had done to the way she saw things. About a version of herself she didn't like. At the bottom of the last page, in smaller writing, she had put, "I think I forgot who you actually were. That's on me." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the same fireproof box with my grandfather's photo. Not because I was holding on to it. Because some things deserve to be preserved without being acted on. The divorce was finalized 11 weeks later. No contest. Clean. The house went on the market and the proceeds split per the original agreement. I rented a small place near the waterfront in a city I had always wanted to live in but we had never moved to because her investor network was elsewhere. 2 bedrooms. A view of the water in the morning. Quiet enough to think. Gerald helped me incorporate the foundation the same month the divorce closed. We called it the Bridgeline Foundation, named for the part of a circuit that connects 2 otherwise separate systems. The mission was simple: provide full-ride coding education, mentorship, and hardware to students in Title I schools who had demonstrated interest in technology but no access to real instruction. I handled the technical curriculum myself. Pulled in 3 former colleagues who believed in the same thing I did. The first cohort was 14 students, ages 15 to 17, from 4 different states. We ran the first program over a summer, remotely, with weekly one-on-ones and a final project that had to solve a real problem in the student's own community. One student built a web app that helped elderly residents in her neighborhood schedule medication pickups from the local pharmacy. Another built a tool that translated school district emergency alerts into 6 languages for non-English-speaking families. A kid from a small town in West Virginia built a basic intrusion detection system for his school's network after it had been hit by ransomware twice in 2 years. He was 16. He presented it to the school board himself. I watched that presentation over a video call, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph. Not vindication. Something quieter and more durable than either of those things. The media picked up the foundation story about 4 months, and a technology journalist had heard about it through one of the students' families and reached out. I agreed to one interview, on the condition that the story focused on the students and not on the backstory behind the funding. The journalist honored that request. My name appeared once in the article, in the second-to-last paragraph, in passing. A few people who knew the fuller story reached out after the piece ran. Former colleagues. One of my wife's friends who I had always liked. My mother, who called just to say she had read it and was proud of me. My wife's name was not in the article. There was no reason for it to be. I don't know much about what her life looked like after the acquisition closed. I heard from a mutual contact that she had left the company within the first year, a common outcome when a founder sells and the acquirer installs their own leadership. I heard she was consulting. I did not look for more than that. I'm not interested in her fall. I was barely interested in her success. Toward the end, when it had stopped feeling like our success and started feeling like a transaction I was processing from the back office while she handled the front of house. What I know is that the version of my life that existed inside that marriage, careful, contracted, always in service of something that kept moving, the finish line, is not a version I miss. There's a line I've been thinking about lately, something Gerald said to me during one of our early foundation calls, when I asked him if he thought I had been too calculated, too cold in the way I handled it. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "The opposite of cruelty isn't passivity. Sometimes it's precision." I think about that when I second-guess myself. Which happens. I'm 32, not a monk. But then I get an email from one of the students. Or I sit in on a mentorship session and watch a 17-year-old explain a concept they had figured out on their own, in language cleaner than most adults use, with a confidence they had clearly earned. And the second-guessing fades. The lake near my apartment freezes in January. I walk along it in the mornings before I start work. There's a bench near the far end where I sometimes sit for 20 minutes before turning back. Nothing happens there. That's the point. I spend a long time building things for other people's timelines. I'm learning, slowly, what it feels like to just sit somewhere and not be accountable to any clock but my own. Last week, one of our first cohort students emailed me. She had been accepted to a 4-year computer science program on a full merit scholarship. She wanted to know if she could stay involved with Bridgeline as a volunteer mentor once she started college. She said the program had been the first place where she felt like the way her brain worked was actually useful, not strange. I wrote back that we would be lucky to have her. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. Some people build things to be remembered. Some build things to prove a point. I used to think I was doing it for the work itself, the purity of a well-structured system, a problem cleanly solved. And that's still part of it. But I think what I'm actually building now is something harder to name. A kind of evidence. That you can be taken for granted for a long time, quietly, without anyone noticing. And it doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you precise. And precision, when you aim it at the right thing, can outlast almost anything else. She thought she was ending my story when she made that call. She was just ending her chapter in it. I have a lot more to write.